Hello, and welcome to Gallery Bytes at the Crocker. And today I'm here with Mallory.
Hi, everybody.
Mallory.
Hi, Pat. Nice to see you.
Nice day to be here and looking at what we're going to see today.
Yeah, Pat, I want to thank you before we start for coming in and sharing these objects with us. Again, my name is Mallory. I work at the museum. I'm going to be kind of the voice that you hear at home. I'm going to be checking the chat and comment section in YouTube, so anyone at home that wants to communicate with us, just drop something in the chat and Pat and I will be able to respond.
That sounds great. Today we're going to talk about African mask. In particular, we're going to talk about the one that's located here on the second floor. And in this case, we have some wonderful African art. The mask, though, in the upper left corner is what we're going to talk about. This mask comes from the Chakway people. You pronounce it Chakway, C-H-O-K-W-E. The Chakway people come from Central Africa, or the Democratic Republic of Africa in central part, and specifically from Angola. Now, the Chakway people are very, very interesting in that they come from a group of people that are matrilineal. Does anyone know what that means?
Matrilineal. If you've got any guesses, put it in the chat.
Matrilineal means that it's the line of the women that the legacy comes from. So unlike a lot of cultures we're familiar with where it's the man, like here in our country we take our father's name, well, it's not just a matter of a name, but matrilineal means that the family line comes from the females of the family. This mask represents a female. And even though it represents a female, it's actually worn by a male. It's made by a male. Now you might ask, why would men wear a woman's mask? And it's because to the Chakway people, the woman, as a matter of fact, they call her Pwa, P-W-O, which in itself means ideal woman. And in order to honor this woman, or Pwa, they make a mask and they use it for ritual dances and sometimes other types of celebrations like initiation. Looking at this mask, we can see that it's a little red, and that's probably because it's carved by a very thin wood. The red tone that it gets probably comes from the red pigment, from the earthen that's used in the ground. You'll see that her hair is all coiffed, and that's also using fabric or textile that's common to the people in Africa. That's a natural resource. Now looking at her expression as well, we can see that her eyes are shut almost. It's like a slit. The African, and particularly the Chakway, do this because it's indicative of the eyes being the boldest part, and also they're slit because she doesn't need to see too much. She's a wise woman as it is. She's all-knowing. Now, we look at the nose, and on this mask, you'll see that there's a small piece of bone, or maybe it's ivory, and that too was used to, like jewelry, to decorate the woman. Her mouth looks like it's shut, because there's no need for her to speak as an honorable woman. The face itself is symmetrical, the forehead being kind of globulous or kind of big, And that's because it indicates that the brain is the soul and the center of all the knowledge that the ideal woman has. Now, we talked about a man wearing this in a dance, in a ceremonial or ritual dance, which they often did. And well, with slit eyes like that, how would he be able to see? And that's because this particular kind of mask was made to wear more or less on the top of the head. The raffia hair would cover the side and the background of the head. And if the ears were there on the mask, they were usually very minuscule, very, very small. And they say that's because that kept the ideal woman from having to listen to gossip. There would be more to just wearing this mask if they were going to represent an ideal woman in a ritual and in a dance. And even though we say dance, it really isn't very much of a dance as we know it, because they're representing the ideal Chakway woman who often just walked regally and still does today. So the man would have that on. He would imitate the walk of the ideal and royal woman, or the head of that particular society or tribe. He would further have on textile cloth, probably made out of the raffia. He would have like a breastplate on that would show the women's breasts, a loincloth to cover his middle, and maybe even just a dress itself. Now again, this wasn't because he was trying to imitate a woman, but to honor the woman.
We have a question in the chat, Pat.
Yes.
Why does the woman have drawing on the forehead and cheeks?
Ah, that's a good question. Scarification, it's like a tattoo, and it's used by African people and a lot of other cultures as well. And in this particular case, that what looks to be a cross is actually a leftover from when the Portuguese came. And they actually used that cross, which to them was called the Cross of Christ. And while they were trying to Christianize the Chalkway people, they left behind this symbol. Other markings or scarification that you might see on the mask, look very closely on this mask, maybe not so many of the circles that were often used to really show contrast and particular features, but on this mask, there's markings on her cheeks, and those often indicate the tears. Remember how we talked about the mask is also used for initiation purposes. So on ceremonial initiations, be it the Shockwave Woman, who's ideal because she's absolutely given birth to children, it may be that she's now having to say goodbye because of the initiation of her child. A daughter who herself is going into womanhood, or even particularly a son, because often the bond between the mother and the son is so strong, it's bittersweet. And the tears actually are significant of the bittersweet tears that a mother would probably have because of initiation and separation of her son. Again, the Shockwave people come from Central Africa, in the middle, and often they developed other things instead of masks. They also had different types of statues and other things, and we'll talk about some of them, some of the other ones that are in this case a little bit later. But there are some other indicators of this particular mask that I want you to see. Again, we talked about that hair. Jewelry was sometimes used as well to embellish and to make her look beautiful. The deep red color, again, from the earth, the ceremonial dance. Other people from the tribe would often, or from the gathering, would get involved as well. Particularly if you were a woman observing this, you would be interested in seeing yourself in the ideal woman as well.
I loved that when we were talking about this piece earlier, you mentioned the hair, which you've mentioned to our audience at home, and how the hair would be on trend so that women watching could see themselves.
This is probably a hairdo that women at that time wore, even myself wearing something very similar, knowing that this was important to my identity and to their identity as well. Hair was often coiffed very high, and usually it was indicative or a picture of royalty when a woman's hair was used to indicate something different or something special about her.
Now, Pat, what about the mask itself, the object? Can you tell us about what it's made out of?
Yes, wood. Often other materials that are similar in that area. In Angola, in Central Africa, or in the Congo, natural resources were usually oil, rubber. So anything I think that would come out of the rubber, ivory, a natural resource, of course, because of the elephants. And again, though, Angola is on the edge, but actually in Central Africa, a little away from the coast, you're not going to find things like shells and beads too much. However, the Portuguese and other areas brought those things in as trade. So things like the cowrie shells, not very popular in Central Africa, but on the coast, the countries like Gabon, other countries that were near the river where these were popular. As a matter of fact, on the African map, you can see that what separates a lot of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Democratic Congo itself is the river, and you would probably find other products like the bones and things like that that you could use to elaborate and to make jewelry which they wear themselves or to put on the mask.
We have a couple questions coming through in the chat. Keep it up for those of you at home. Pat, do you know why the society was matrilineal when others were not? Was there like an event that led to it, or they're asking, was it just luck? Was it just tradition?
Well, I think in my research I read that the people actually felt that, it goes back years and years and years and generations, that the original man, and they actually believed that he was an ancestral woman himself. So to go back would mean to go back a long way, I'm sure, and it's not just the Shockway people, but other people that from the different African tribes used women as the brains and the resources for a lot of things. Now, that does not mean that the women were there in battle. The men still had their part. Even for these dances, there are men, there are also masqueraders wearing masks that are men that are wearing male masks as well. And when they're out dancing with the masqueraders that are wearing the women, it certainly is a message of fertility, indicating the hope of that people lasting for a very long time. But I love learning as much as anybody else where, and sometimes we say behind every great man is a great woman, and a lot of males probably would agree to that. But there are a lot of cultures that do go back all the way. And again, it's honoring. It's not like we do in our Western culture now where we pick up the man's name and so on. Women are obviously very important because we are the ones that keep the family line going. And again, their ideal woman is, she is ideal because of the power behind giving birth and having children. So I think that that is probably the reason why she's honored. And again, it's matrilineal. What is important is that you do understand that it's not the man trying to be a woman, but to honor her in every way that he can. As a matter of fact, in a lot of Western art, men draw paintings of what they consider to be the ideal woman. So it probably would go back a lot further than probably even the Garden of Eden, you know, where we would pick up on that. So, good question.
Yeah, I was happy with it. There's another one here. Can you talk again, because it's, even here standing in front of the mask, it's very hard to see the slits for the eyes. So imagining wearing it. So, and I know the Chakway Mask that we're speaking of has it, and then there's another one in the case too.
Yes. What you will find, especially in the Shockway when they were making their mask, it's not on this one particularly, but oftentimes you will find in the mask a white kind of powder, or it appears to be a paint that's used to highlight a circle around the eye to show emphasis. As a matter of fact, there's a mask lower down, and I believe this may be from the Kaband or the Kunde people. And that is the use of what's called kaolin, which is like a clay wash that's used from the earth, from the ground. I mean, the red pigment in our mask for the Chakway Woman comes from the earth, and clay comes from the earth. But if the clay is white, then they would probably, well, they would use it to have that white circle around. Now, it also has a meaning, okay, because the white circle is indicative of the spiritual realm. It's important that you understand that a lot of the beliefs have to do with the spirit and the spiritual realm as well.
And then there's one other mask right in the center that has different pigmentation too. And you told me a wonderful little anecdote, a connection to that mask. Do you want to share it with our friends?
Yes, well, we've had children come in on our tours, and it was pointed out from other docents to this docent that the first time that they saw this, they thought, ah, Baby Yoda. And other than because the one in the center here does look a little bit like Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda probably has the big eyes, but again, the circular face, the hair in this particular mask is molded. It looks like it's molded instead of raffia and the use of another material. One would guess that this mask too is either wood, Metal, again, was a resource, but it was really a resource that was reserved for royalty and royal masks. This one right here, though, does have the scarification that we talked about. If you can see and look a little closer, you can even see the cross of Christ, again, which was a symbol that was left when the colonizers came over and traded the resources and left them with that. So.
And I think we have 2 more questions today,
Yes.
one from a friend at home and then one from me. So we'll start with our visitor at home. Do you know why the men wore the masks in the ceremonies? Why didn't women just wear them to portray the same gender?
I really believe that it was just a positional thing. It was something that came down from tradition. I remember in my research too, a professor in art saying that, and I don't know if I could say the same thing so definitively, that women do not wear masks in African rituals, that it's always men, you know, so that tells me that it's not just the Chakway. But it does lead me to believe that when I am watching the dances on YouTube or whatever, that I'm going to be looking to see if there are women. But other than that, again, it is so important to understand that the men were honoring, you know, raising her above and making sure that it seems like it was stronger and better than any Mother's Day that we, or a compliment that we could ever think about, that our children and the children and their children would someday honor me as a mother, or you, Mallory, as a mother, just for the fact that it's felt that we're empowered from giving birth. So.
And then Pat, my last question to you is there anything else you want to tell our viewers at home?
Yes, absolutely. Again, I'm on the 2nd floor of the Crocker, and we always have fantastic exhibits, and of course the Crocker home itself, and the California art and the contemporary art. But often overlooked is the 2nd floor, where we have a collection of Oriental oceanic art. And of course this African art, which was expanded, I believe, in 2019. Every one of these pieces come from a permanent, or our permanent collection here at the Crocker. It would be worth it even if you had to make a 2nd trip to come see this. I know the very first time that I saw and came to the Crocker, there was so much going on. It was Black History Month. There was entertainment. There were people selling things, and just every kind of celebration downstairs. It was wonderful. But I peeked upstairs on the 2nd floor for just a minute, and I didn't have time to see everything. Lucky for me, being a docent, I've been able to just glaze through this, and I believe that this Chalkway Woman has always and will always be one of my favorites, so you should come.
Thank you so much, Pat, for sharing this object with us. Thank you to our friends at home. Like Pat mentioned, she's one of our docents here at the museum, so when you come for your visit, look for the green lanyard around her neck. There are a number of docents that are here in the galleries who are just as knowledgeable as our friend Pat and would really love to share our stories with you. Thanks again to everyone at home. Thank you again, Pat. We'll see you next time for Gallery Bites.
Hello, and welcome to Gallery Bytes here at the Crocker. I'm Pat Harper, docent, and with me today is Mallory Marsh.
Hi everybody, hi Pat.
Hi, beautiful day.
It is, it's a great day at the museum. Just a note for our visitors at home, the museum is open today, so if you hear some noise in the background, those are just other patrons enjoying the new exhibitions and coming in after a period of long closure. So you might hear a little bit from them. You're going to hear a lot from Pat, so Pat is going to talk to us about one of the objects in the case that you see on screen. And then you might hear me sometimes. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. If any questions or comments come up in there, I'm going to relay them to Pat so we can have a back and forth with you just a little bit. So any questions, any comments, throw them in the chat and we'll be able to dialogue that way. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what it means to be a docent?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been a docent for a couple of years. I mean, you just don't count COVID these days. So docents never finish their work. I love being here at the Crocker. I'm retired from insurance for many years, and this art has always been an interest of mine. And the Crocker right here, Sacramento, in our own backyard, is an often you don't realize it until you come here. And that's what happened to me when I came, and I didn't want to leave. It's my second home, Mallory, honestly.
That's great to hear.
And every time I come, I meet new people, and all of my neighbors are so interested. I think we've got a few members because of meeting people in the grocery store. Obviously, don't have a problem with talking, but I think that's why they hired me for that too. But today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite pieces. It's an object. It is actually a mask from Africa, Central Africa, in the Congo area to be exact. There's many masks and many, many people, of course, that come from the many, many, many countries in huge Africa. But we're going to talk today particularly about the Chalkway people. Chakway, C-H-O-K-W-E. The Chakway people basically, and we're going to talk about the mask in the upper left corner there. Chakway people are very unique. They have some of the greatest craftsmen and mask makers that come out of Africa, although Africa has no shortage of wonderful artwork. The Chakway people basically are from the Angola side of Africa. They also were a matrilineal group of people, meaning that their ancestry line comes from the woman or the female. Thus, this mask, which represents the Chakway woman or the ideal woman. Chakway itself meaning ideal woman. Now, this mask, though made actually by, a mask of a woman and most likely crafted by a man, is worn by a man, not a woman. Men are the mask wearers in Africa. This particular mask is made again to represent the ideal woman and worn because the men wanted to honor the woman, not duplicate or look like her in any way is the intent, but strictly to honor her. Let's take a look at this mask. It's it's red and it's made of wood. We can see that the face itself is symmetrical. It's got a large, like, forehead, and the reason for that in a lot of African art, where the forehead is central or bobulous and sticks out, is an indication of knowledge. And then we have the eyes, big round eyes, but they're not open. They're slits. And often that was done because the masks were used for several reasons, again, to honor a woman, for ritual ceremonies, for funerals indicating the spiritual realm, as well as for initiations, and for the woman and the ancestry of the woman herself. The eyes are slit because, in this case, the woman, the Chakway ideal woman, is all knowledgeable. She has seen all that needs to be seen. The nose on this mask is small, and you'll see a small piece of jewelry or ivory, it looks like in this case, which jewelry is often found on the Chakway, on the Chakway mask. In a side view, you don't have earrings here, but the ears themselves are small. That's not uncommon to have small ears. The reason for the small ears is so that the ideal woman has no need for gossip. Her mouth, too, continues to show that lack of too much expression because she's in control. She has the power. And then the hair. The hair is often coiffed, which is what women at that time, these hairstyles were trendy, almost like my hair. A woman at the time would relate to the mask having raffia and textile and hair that was created by braids of the raffia and textile in this elaborate way. It would be nice if you were a woman watching the rituals and the dances, because you would see yourself, including the hairdo, being honored in this. Now, as I said, men would wear this mask. They would also wear a costume, sometimes women's clothing made out of the textiles of the time, a breastplate indicating the women's body image and breast, clothes that covered the loincloth and that were used by a woman or the Shockway woman. And again, for a dance ritual, but probably not dance in the way that we would probably see it. But if it was the Chakway woman, it was graceful and demonstrative of her grace, of her power, and of her level of leadership. The Chakway woman, being the ideal woman, often had the mask or would also show scarification, and that is, you can see that in the forehead. You can see that there's what appears to be a cross. That is a cross. When the Portuguese came to Africa, particularly to Angola, to convert the Chakway and other people into Christianity, they left them with many symbols of Christianity. That particular symbol is the Portuguese Cross of Christ, and it appears on many of the masks of Africa. On this Chakway mask, there's other scarifications as well, or scars. In this case, look closely beneath the eyes on each side. These are symbols of tears. The mask was used for ritual dances that again included honoring and passing on the legacy, as well as funerals and initiations. So when the Chakway woman is honored and represented, it's because of her childbearing, but often for initiations it was bittersweet. It could have been that her daughters were coming of the age of childbearing, or her sons in particularly. This indicated that the bond between the mother and the child was being separated, thus the tears.
Pat, you started to mention some of the materials used on this mask or masks like this. You mentioned wood, raffia, ivory. Are there any other materials you'd like to note?
Well, on this one, you can see that the raffia, if we looked at the hair, is heavily braided. There may be some other fibers and cloth that's used. Metal was used occasionally for mask, but even though in Africa where it was copper and tin, it wasn't as prolific, and it was usually relegated to masks that were created for royalty. Even though we're talking about the ideal woman, I'm sure that there were many ideal women. The mask also, and you'll see in a lot of African masks that they were decorated with beads that were common for the area. The beads themselves sometimes were used for trade from other societies and groups that lived as neighboring groups. Seashells, often we look at the cowrie seashell being from Africa, and it comes mostly from the coast though. So unlike the people from Gabon, which is on the coast of Africa, in Central Africa there was probably less access of the seashells and things like that. However, again, the Portuguese, the French, the Belgian often brought with them those kinds of things, as well as the neighbors using it for trading. The Chalkway people were very, very good traders. They trade even before the Europeans came. They traded amongst themselves a lot in order to survive and embellish, I guess, or to keep their people and their tribal lines going.
I like that you started to touch on the trading or references to anybody else nearby geographically, because we do see, we're talking about one mask in a case that has a few different objects. Are there any other objects in the case that reference or have a relationship with the masks we've been talking about?
Yes, well, every object in this case comes from the central part of Africa. In fact, everyone comes from the Congo area. You know, there are some statues here in particular, and then the mask up at the top is from a different group. Of particular reference, we talked about the eyes on the Shockwave Woman, and the mask that's down below in the center, you'll notice a white powdery kind of that's being used around the eyes. As a matter of fact, that is more of the facial mask now that we look at it, because rather than slits, you do have openings. But nonetheless, the white that's used around the eyes there, you can find occasionally on the Chakway Mask as well. And it's to one, aesthetically, it provides a contrast around the eye, but the use of the color white also has to do with the spiritual realm. With these people having a lot of respect for the spiritual realm, for the afterlife, or even for them priding themselves in having some insight into the spiritual realm. So that one down at the bottom. Now the one above in the center is very interesting as well. The children that come here refer to it, or they say it may even look like baby Yoda, and it does in a sense. But one of the similarities or commonalities of that mask, as well as the Chakway Mask, is again that symbol of the cross on the forehead, as well as there's other symbols on the side of the eye. Did you know that the women, the Shockwave women and women of Africa do have, it's common that they have tattooing as well, which probably would indicate certain pride and identity. When you think of Africa as big as it is, the biggest, well, the second biggest continent to Asia, and then you think of all of the countries that make up Africa, and then all of the families and clans and people within those countries, you can see a myriad of just a lot of people trading, as well as their arts and skills. So.
Now we've mentioned that we're on the second floor of the museum.
Yes.
We're in a gallery that has been grouped by a collection area defined by a location. So
yes.
we've talked about the African collection. Osmod is right down the hall.
Yes.
We also have right above us the European collection, the California, and
yes.
Asian art. I know you had some notes and thoughts because as educators, we always like to compare and contrast. So a few things that you wanted to say about noticeable differences between these types of objects and what you might find in a European collection, for example.
Well, one of the things is in African art and a lot that surrounds us. Now, the contemporary African art may be a little bit different, but we rarely know who did it. So you won't see on the cards here where you won't even find very much provenance information, period. Language was an issue in Africa. There were different dialects. And so art being music, being sculpture, dance, that was their way of communicating a lot of times. So there was no need to sign their work. The other thing is that African art is not created for hanging on the wall. These masks that we're looking at right now come from late 18th, 19th century. So you're looking at 120, 150-year-old items that were made more or less for performance, for communication, for legacy reasons, for passing on the culture. Western European art is, we're used to, it is decorative. We want to hang it on the walls. We're interested as to where it came from as well as the artists that did it. You won't find that as readily in African art.
Pat, I've so enjoyed everything you've shared with us today. I wonder in our last few moments together if there's anything else you want to tell us about the objects or about where we are, or just any last thoughts for our audience.
Yes. It would be remiss for me to not say that this second floor is often overlooked. We have beautiful areas in this museum, but do come up and take a look. We've got Asian art up and down the halls, and we've got art from the Pacific islands. That alone, you can see the similarities in the native works that they have as well, from the indigenous people, you know, that come from the islands. And there's so many similarities in the African work that's been done just for us to keep that connection. Not that we don't have the same connection in contemporary or Western European art, Certainly the masters did it for us to see someday, but you would do yourself good to come up and see every one of these pieces, which are a part of the permanent collection.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for all of your work today. Thank you for that kind invitation to our visitors to visit you and us at the museum.
Yes.
You'll notice Pat's wearing a nice green lanyard that indicates that she is one of our docents.
Exactly.
We have over 100 docents here at the museum. When you come for a visit, if you see anybody wearing that lanyard, feel free to come over, say hello.
Pull us over.
Yeah, they love to share the breadth of knowledge that they have, and they also love to learn from you. So we look forward to seeing you here at the museum. We'll also be online again with Gallery Bytes in a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.